Hey, this is Joe from Home Studio Corner, changing things up today. I want to talk about one of my newest toys. Well, first is this beautiful Fender Player Plus Stratocaster. I've never owned a Strat. Now I do. But also this, you can't see it, but on the floor is a Helix. So I've been eyeballing a Helix for years, and I finally found one used, bought it, and I've been having a lot of fun setting it up. So I've just scratched the surface with it, but being that I'm an audio guy and I have a good understanding of routing and signal flow and gain staging, I feel like it's been really fun to tap into a lot of the functions inside the inside the Helix. Your name's Felix now. This thing is now Felix the Helix. The features inside of it, especially the routing and some of those things, that have been really fun to mess with, and I want to show you kind of my first patch that I'm kind of proud of as far as building things. If you're not familiar with this is a box from Line 6 called the Helix. They make a plug-in version as well. It's an amp in a box type deal. It's got a bunch of amp models, cabinet models, a bunch of pedals to really dial in lots of different tones, and you can access them all from your feet, which is fun. So I'm going to be showing you HX Edit, which is the editing software. It's just editing what's happening on the Helix. So what I'm going to show you here, this is kind of where all the magic happens, and then when I'm playing, I'll switch between different snapshots, and I'll explain those in a second. So here is my setup. If you're familiar with the Helix, this may look familiar to you, but if you're not, if you're new to it, input is over here. So whatever input I've got my guitar or whatever plugged into, and the signal runs this way horizontally. And when it gets to here, it can go a number of places. I've got it set to just continue on this secondary path here. So the signal goes like this, meow, meow, like that. It also splits here and comes back together. So that's important for what I want to show you today. So the idea was I've been playing with my buddy Tim on drums and Joel on bass and me on guitar, and we're writing some songs. I'm thinking about if we were to perform, especially like a live stream here on this YouTube channel, if it's just me on guitar, I'd love to find a way to effectively go from one mono guitar up the middle to big stereo guitars without having all the phase issues and weirdness that come with that. And I experimented with a lot of different ways of doing that, and I've decided the 2-amp setup works best. But I want it to go from a single amp in the middle to 2 amps on the side. And one of the things you do when you're working with Helix is you have to kind of budget your DSP resources. You can't put everything in because there's a certain amount of resources available. So I found putting 2 amps into this first path was about all I could put, and I couldn't add any other things there. So having a 3-amp setup was out of the question, most likely if I wanted to have some other effects as well. So I figured out some cool ways to do the routing. So let me play it for you, and then I'll walk you through what I did. So first I'll play you the clean sound, then I'll play you my medium sound, which is in stereo. So the clean's in mono, and the medium's in stereo. So it sounds something like this. So you get the idea. It goes from a clean Fender amp to 2 amps, both overdriven. I'm going to walk you through how I do that. So the signal comes in here. We'll skip over this volume boost for a second. So the clean setting looks like this. It's the guitar, goes through this amp here, goes through a little slapback delay, goes through a little spring reverb. The rest of these are not engaged. But this is the first amp. And I'm using the US Princess, which is modeled after a Fender Princeton, which I love. I've played one a few times. It's a great amp. It's kind of the tone that I like the best out of the amps here, especially on like the neck pickup or the position 4. Nice, warm. It's not super duper clean, because who wants that? But it's got a little bit of grit, but it's mostly a clean sound. So I would play for that like in a church setting with some reverb and things like that. Ever since watching the Beatles documentary Get Back, I've been having a little bit of a love affair with clean guitar tones, because that's really all. They had a little overdrive when they cranked the amps on the rooftop, but for the most part, they're just rocking nice clean guitars, and I dig that a lot. So having just this amp plus a bunch of different effects, like I can add in this cool harmonic tremolo, and the different delays and reverbs. Got a lot of tones that I can get just from switching pickup positions, sticking with that Fender Princess amp at the volume at about 7, okay? So then I want to switch over to a heavier tone, but I also want it to go stereo. That's where the splitter comes in. So I've got a button on my Helix here that says big and wide. And what it's doing, it's actually controlling several different parameters. When I press that, several things happen. So it's a lot like automation in Studio One, things like that. I press that button, a number of things happen. First of all, this second amplifier gets turned on. This distortion pedal in front of the Fender amp gets turned on. This is the Alpaca Rouge. It's the Red Llama pedal from Way Huge. Super cool. And then the other thing that happens is here on this combiner where the signals come back together, it goes from having the signals split. So here's the clean routing where this is level A, this is level B of the split. Level A is at normal, level B is turned down all the way, and level A is right in the center. But when I hit my button for the big and wide, it switches to this. Level B is turned up to 0 dB, and A is panned left, B is panned right. And there's a little extra volume here. So that allows me to go from Fender in the middle clean to Fender on the side with distortion in front of it, and then what I've got over here, the Brit Plexi normal. So a Marshall on the right that's just overdriven normally. Here's what that Marshall sounds like just by itself. Very cool, very fun. Let me undo that, go back to what I had before. Here is what the Fender sounds like with this amp in front of it, this distortion. So here's the distortion off. Here's that distortion on. So that Alpaca adds a whole bunch of low end. Almost sounds like a fuzz if you go to the neck pickup. Very cool. So let me undo this, and this is what you get. You get the just nice overdriven Plexi on the right, and then a Fender being driven pretty hard by a distortion pedal on the left. Let me get that back. Okay, so this is what that sounds like. Now, one of the ways I'm able to make it sound so stereo is, that it's two different amps, so two different signals. But if you go to the cabinet, I've got this first amp with a 57, the mic real close, and no early reflections. But the second amp, I'm using a ribbon mic, a 121, and the distance is about 4 inches from the cabinet. That helps it not be too boomy in the low end. And I've got a bunch of early reflections. So the early reflections are set at 18%, which gives it a little bit of difference between the two. That and the slapback delay is a little stereo as well. And going from mono to stereo just sounds huge. It's just my favorite. And now the nerds among us are going to ask, yeah, that's cool, it's stereo, but I bet when you move it to mono, it's going to sound terrible, which is a great question. That's what I thought. So let me change this channel. Let me sum it to mono, and let's listen to going from that same mono to stereo signal, but now it's all in mono, which may happen at a show or just whatever your situation is where you can't have stereo. Let's see how it sounds. If anything, it gets a little thicker in mono, which I'm always okay with. The sound person can always roll off a little extra low end if it's coming in at mono, and if it's nice and wide, that's great too. And the balance is, I haven't done this on headphones in a few days, so it may be a little left or right heavy, but that's easy enough to adjust by just coming up here and adjusting the left or right volumes up or down to get that nice and balanced. But part of what makes it feel stereo is that it is a little out of balance. So when I play softer and louder, different transients come through differently with both amps because they're both very different sounding, and that's what adds to the fun of it. So my third big setting, aside from being able to add any different effects to this, the third big setting, it's called big. So I've got clean, medium, and big. Totally should call it small, medium, large, but anyway. The big one is where this volume block comes in. So here, I literally, all my resources are spent on this upper block here, this upper path, I can't add any other pedals here, any other amps pedals or anything, but I can add a simple volume. So I've got this basically just a gain plugin set to plus 10. So it's adding 10 decibels into both amps. Okay, so that it's adding 10 decibels, the signal gets split to both amps, and we get this extra volume going into the amp. So 10 decibels is a lot, but the fact that it's going into amps that are already overdriven and compressing means that we end up with just a little more distortion, a little more volume, but mostly just like a bigger, it's like we added distortion on top and all we did was push the volume in. So here is going from medium to big. So I've got big, medium, and clean, and they're all in the same ballpark volume-wise. It doesn't jump huge jumps, but it just perfect for, you know, a song that starts off really chill, and then we want to add in some stuff later without changing presets. That's not the song. And then maybe there's a chorus where there's a big solo. Those weren't anything, but it's that idea. But what's cool is the big, I didn't have to add another pedal to it. I just boosted into both amps, so they're just going nuts. And since it's all digital, I don't have to worry about blowing a tube or something like that. So those are the big three sounds, and then I've added as many effects as I can fit into the preset to have just a bunch available. Then I can duplicate this and customize it on a song per song basis, which is what I'll probably work on next. But I've got things like a dotted eighth note delay. That's technically a dotted eighth with a quarter note delay after it. Here's just the quarter note. Harmonic tremolo, which is pretty cool and stereo. And then auto wah, because why not? So I know a lot of my subscribers have the Helix. If you don't, they make a native plugin version that gives you all these tones inside of your software. They make a couple different versions of the Helix. There's smaller versions that don't have quite as much processing if you just want a few of the effects and the amps. It's very cool. They didn't pay me to do this video. I bought this myself used, but I'm really digging it. And at some point, I will make some patches available, I think, so remind me. Otherwise, that's it for me for today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and I'll see you in the next one.